The night sky above the battlefield was painted with fire. Explosions cracked across the horizon, and beams of plasma shot like angry comets through the smoke. Captain Elias Ward pressed his back against a piece of shattered metal, catching his breath. The human front was collapsing. His squad had been scattered, and he had been running for survival through a war that seemed endless. The humans and the Velari Empire had fought for years. The Velari were taller, stronger, with skin, like silverstone and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. They carried technology that outmatched much of what humans had. But humans had their willpower, their stubbornness, and their ability to survive where no one else could. Elias knew this truth better than anyone. He had survived battles where everyone else thought it was impossible. As he peeked from behind cover, he noticed something strange. In the smoke ahead, near the wreckage of a Velari transport ship, someone was crawling. At first, he thought it was just another soldier, but then he noticed the clothing, dark purple armor with royal markings. It wasn't a normal soldier. It was someone important. Cautious but curious, Elias moved closer. The figure was a young Velari woman bleeding from her side. Her armor was cracked and her face carried pain, but her eyes, those glowing silver eyes, watched him with a strange mixture of fear and pride. She tried to raise a weapon, but her strength failed. The weapon clattered to the ground. Elias raised his rifle, his instincts telling him to finish the job. She was the enemy. Every order he had ever received told him to eliminate threats. Yet something inside him hesitated. She was wounded, barely alive, struggling even to breathe. She wasn't a threat anymore. She was just someone in need. "Tiwar," soldier in him whispered, "end it now." But the man in him thought, if I leave her, she dies. If I kill her, what does that make me? With a heavy breath, Elias lowered his weapon. "Don't move," he said firmly, though he knew she might not understand his language. Still, his tone carried meaning. The woman coughed, then forced words through her lips. "Human. Soldier." Her voice was weak but proud. Elias quickly knelt beside her, pulling open a small medkit he always carried. He knew it was dangerous, foolish even, but his hands moved anyway. He wrapped her wound, applied a clotting agent, and tried to stabilize her breathing. She stared at him in disbelief. No human should have done this, certainly not for her. When she regained enough strength, she whispered, Why help me?" Elias shook his head, still focused on sealing her wound. "Because you're bleeding out, and because I'm not going to leave someone to die like this, not even an enemy." For a long moment, silence sat between them, broken only by distant explosions. She looked at him not as an enemy, but as something she could not understand. To her people, mercy was rare. To humans, it was instinct. Elias tried to help her stand, but she was too weak. He sighed and lifted her onto his shoulder. She was lighter than he expected, her body thin but strong beneath the armor. With every step, he felt the danger around him. Patrols, drones, or worse, other human soldiers who might not understand why he was carrying an enemy. But he pushed forward. The battlefield was cruel. Dead machines and fallen soldiers lined the ground. Smoke stung his eyes as he carried her toward safer ground. She muttered something in her language, words he didn't understand, but the tone was soft, almost grateful. At last, Elias reached a ruined building where he could rest. He laid her down gently, giving her water from his canteen. She drank slowly, never breaking eye contact. She seemed to be studying him, as if trying to memorize his face. "I don't know who you are," Elias said quietly, "but you're going to live, and maybe that means something." What Elias did not know was that this woman was not just any soldier. She was Princess Kaelin of the Velari, heir to the throne, hidden on the battlefield to observe her army and inspire her people. To be saved by a human soldier was unthinkable in her culture. In Velari tradition, if someone saved your life in blood and battle, you owed them everything. For royalty, that debt was binding, eternal and unbreakable. Kaelin felt the weight of that truth as she looked at Elias. He had no idea what he had done. He thought he was simply helping a wounded stranger. But in that single act of compassion, he had tied their fates together. She whispered softly in her language. Fate bonded. Elias didn't hear or understand. He just checked her bandages again, scanning the horizon for more threats. He had no idea the path he had chosen, no idea that his decision to help, to show mercy, would change the course of two civilizations. As dawn began to rise, Elias tightened his grip on his rifle, guarding the alien princess he didn't even know was royalty. He thought he was just saving a life. But in truth, he had already stepped into a destiny far greater than himself, and the universe was watching. The human outpost was tense when Captain Elias Ward returned. Soldiers glanced at him with confusion, whispering as he walked past carrying the wounded alien. To them, she was the enemy. To Elias, she was just someone who needed saving. But even he knew this situation was dangerous. The medics rushed forward, ready to take her from him, but Kaylin refused. Her silver eyes locked onto Elias, and she shook her head weakly. The medics hesitated, unsure. Elias frowned. She needs help, he said, lowering her onto a stretcher. Still, her hand caught his wrist with surprising strength. She whispered words in her language, soft but firm. No one understood. Later, when she woke in the medical bay, the truth came out. The alien spoke in broken human tongue, her accent sharp but clear enough. I am Kaylin, daughter of Velari throne. The room fell silent. A princess. A royal heir. Everyone stared at Elias, and whispers spread like fire. He hadn't just saved a soldier. He had saved the enemy's most valuable figure. The commanding officer, Colonel Briggs, called Elias into his office. Briggs was a broad man with a scarred face, someone who had seen too many battles. His voice was harsh. Ward, do you have any idea what you've done? Elias stood at attention, though his chest felt heavy. I saved a life, sir. Briggs slammed his fist on the desk. You saved her. Do you realize what this means? The Velari will demand her return. They'll say we captured her. This could start a war all over again, worse than before. Elias stayed calm. Sir, leaving her to die didn't seem right. Orders or no orders. The colonel glared but said nothing. Deep inside, even Briggs knew Elias was different. He had always been the kind of soldier who listened to his conscience, before blind orders. That quality made him difficult but also valuable. Hours later, a Velari envoy ship arrived outside the outpost. A group of tall, armored aliens stepped into the human camp, their glowing eyes filled with pride and suspicion. Their leader spoke in his own tongue, demanding the princess, but Kaylin refused. She stood weakly, still bandaged, but her voice was sharp like steel. No, she declared, pointing to Elias. This human saved me. By blood and by battle I am bound to him. Velari law is clear. My fate is tied to his. The humans in the room stared in shock. Elias blinked, trying to understand. What does that mean? He asked, his voice low. The envoy growled. It means she has invoked the ancient right. By your act of saving her life, you are her bonded protector. It cannot be broken. Colonel Briggs shook his head in disbelief. This is madness. He's a soldier, not a pawn in your politics. But Kaylin did not waver. Her eyes stayed on Elias. Fate has chosen. I will not leave without him. Elias felt the weight of the room pressing on him. He wanted to protest, to say he had only done what any decent human would. Yet deep inside, he felt something strange. When Kaylin looked at him, he felt a pull, a sense that something bigger was happening. The humans debated, the aliens argued, and the room nearly boiled over. In the end, a fragile bargain was struck. To avoid war, the humans agreed that Elias would remain at Kaylin's side until a decision could be reached between their leaders. He would act as her guardian, though he never asked for the role. That night, Elias sat outside the outpost staring at the alien stars. Kaylin approached quietly, wrapped in a silver cloak. She moved with dignity despite her wounds. You do not understand what you have done, she said softly. Elias glanced at her. No, I don't. You keep talking about bonds and fate. I just helped you because I couldn't walk away. Kalen studied him for a long time, then nodded. That is why the bond is true. Velari believe when life is given in battle, destiny ties two souls. For me as princess, it is stronger. My people cannot ignore it, and neither can I. Elias rubbed his forehead. So I'm, what? Stuck with you now? Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Not stuck, chosen. He exhaled, unsure whether to laugh or be afraid. Great. Just what I needed. But even as he spoke, something inside stirred. He couldn't explain it, but he felt a strange connection, a thread pulling him toward her. The days that followed were filled with tension. Soldiers watched Elias with suspicion. The Velari envoys remained close, their eyes always on him. Yet through it all, Kalen never left his side. She asked questions about humanity, about Earth, about why a man would risk himself for an enemy. Elias gave simple answers, but his honesty seemed to impress her. One evening, as the sun set across the war-scarred horizon, Kalen spoke again. You humans are strange. You fight hard, yet you show mercy. You bleed, yet you laugh. You lose, yet you keep standing. Perhaps that is why fate chose you. Elias shook. The morning sun rose over the human outpost, casting long shadows across the broken terrain. Captain Elias Ward stood outside, scanning the horizon. He had never felt so out of place. Kalen, the Velari princess, was recovering from her wounds, in the medical bay, yet her presence was felt everywhere. Soldiers whispered as they passed, and even the commanding officers seemed uneasy around her. The Velari envoy had agreed to the temporary truce, but the tension between humans and aliens was palpable. Elias could feel it. Every time he moved, eyes followed him, measuring him, judging him. And all the while, Kalen's words echoed in his mind. You are bound to me by fate. Elias didn't understand what that meant. To him, it was just survival, just the act of helping someone who was hurt. But to the Velari, fate was real, and now he was part of it. He walked into the medical bay where Kalen sat on a cot, her armor repaired but still marked by battle, scars. She looked up as he entered. You're coming, she said simply. Coming where? Elias asked. To the summit, she replied. The leaders of both sides will meet soon. They will decide the next step. You must come as my guardian. Elias frowned. Guardian? I'm a soldier, not a babysitter. Kalen's eyes gleamed. This is not babysitting. You are my protector. My bond to you is sacred. If you leave, it will break the peace. He rubbed his forehead. And if I refuse? Kalen's expression hardened. Then the truce fails and thousands more will die. You cannot refuse. Elias realized she was right. He had wanted nothing more than to survive, but now he carried responsibility far beyond his rank. He nodded reluctantly. Fine, I'll go. But don't expect me to follow all your customs. Kalen smiled faintly. I do not expect it. I only need you to survive with me. The summit was held in a ruined Velari temple, a neutral place, chosen for its historical importance. Humans and aliens gathered, their banners torn and faded, yet symbols of pride still strong. Elias stood at Kalen's side, feeling the weight of every gaze. The alien leaders were tall, elegant, and intimidating. They spoke in their language, translated by devices, but the tone was clear: suspicion and authority. The human leaders were equally tense, trying to keep control without seeming weak. Elias noticed something immediately. Both sides expected failure. They assumed humans would panic, that the Velari would attack, that nothing could change the outcome. Elias, however, had no intention of failing, not if Kalen's life and possibly the lives of thousands depended on him. As the talks began, Kalen spoke first. Her voice was calm, measured, yet carried authority. I am Princess Kalen. This human, she gestured toward Elias, saved my life. By our law, I am bound to him. Any decision about my future must include him. A murmur ran through the Velari delegation. Some gasped in shock while others frowned in anger. Elias felt the tension rising. One elder Velari finally spoke, his voice deep and resonant. You dare to claim a human can be bound to a princess? This is unheard of. A human is not worthy of such honor. Kalen met his gaze steadily. Worthiness is not measured by title or strength alone. Fate has chosen him, and fate cannot be denied. Elias shifted uneasily. He had no idea what to say. Humans in the room looked at him with a mix of admiration and confusion. He had saved her life, yes, but he had never imagined that one simple act would force both civilizations to listen to him. The talks continued for hours. Each side presented arguments, threats, and conditions. But Elias noticed something strange. Kalen's presence calmed some of the Velari delegates. Her trust in him, her insistence that he be included, made them pause. Perhaps they were starting to see humans differently, not as weak, fragile creatures, but as beings capable of courage and loyalty. During a break, Kalen leaned toward Elias. They are testing you, she said softly. They want to see if you are worthy of the bond. Elias frowned. I'm not even sure I understand the bond. Kalen's silver eyes studied him. It is not just law or ritual. It is connection. Life saved in battle creates a link. You feel it or you do not. Fate chooses, not we. Elias looked at her, realizing that her words were not just tradition. She believed in it deeply, and somehow in her presence he felt something stirring, a strange awareness of her, as if he could sense her mood, her intentions. Before the talks resumed, an alarm rang. A group of Velari extremists had attempted to infiltrate the summit, aiming to assassinate Kalen and spark a war. Chaos erupted instantly. Elias moved without thinking. He grabbed Kalen's arm and pulled her down behind a wall of broken stone. His training took over, moving swiftly, keeping low, scanning every angle. Kalen's instincts were sharp too. Together they dodged a volley of laser fire and guided the humans and Velari delegates to safety. When the attack ended, silence hung heavy over the temple. The extremists had been captured, but the tension remained. Kalen turned to Elias, her eyes shining with admiration. You saved many today, she said. Not just me. Elias shook his head. I'm just a soldier. Anyone would have done it. Kalen smiled faintly. Not anyone would have. Humans often act out of fear or anger. You acted with compassion. That is why fate chose you. For the first time, Elias understood that he was no longer just a soldier following orders. He was part of something bigger, something that crossed the boundaries of race, culture, and even species. He was bound to Kalen, not by choice alone, but by destiny. As the summit ended and delegates returned to their camps, Elias stood with Kalen under the fading light. The wind carried the scent of burning wood and metal, yet it also carried possibility. He realized that the uneasy alliance they had formed was fragile but powerful, and he knew one thing for certain. He could not walk away now. Fate had chosen, and he would follow. The night was quiet at the human outpost, though quiet in war zones was always temporary. Captain Elias Ward sat near a small fire, cleaning his rifle, but his mind was elsewhere. Princess Kalen had requested a private talk, and he was unsure what to expect. Kalen approached, her silver eyes reflecting the flames. Though her wounds had healed enough to walk without support, her presence still carried the weight of authority. She did not sit. Instead, she stood silently, observing Elias with a thoughtful gaze. You do not know much about my people, she said finally, breaking the silence. Elias shrugged. I know you're strong, stubborn, and apparently bound to me by some ancient law I barely understand. Kalen's lips curved into a faint smile. There is more. Much more. She gestured for him to follow, and together they walked toward a secluded area of the outpost, away from the watchful eyes of soldiers and envoys. The distant sounds of the war zone seemed to fade, leaving only the soft hum of the night wind. "My people have rules," Kalen began. "Rules older than most humans can imagine. Among them is the law of life debt. When one life is given in battle, a bond is created. With royalty, this bond is stronger. It is spiritual, physical, and sometimes even emotional. Fate chooses, not we." Elias frowned. "So by saving you, I'm connected to you? Like, magically or something?" Kalen laughed softly, though it was tinged with seriousness. "Not magic. It is a connection, a shared awareness, a bond that grows. Over time, you will notice it. Perhaps even feel it tonight." He looked at her skeptically. "And if I don't want a bond?" Her gaze was firm. "It is not about want. It is about destiny. The moment you saved me, the threads of our lives intertwined. We are bound. The bond cannot be broken easily. It is neither punishment nor reward, it simply exists." Elias exhaled slowly. He had survived countless battles, seen the worst of humanity and aliens alike, yet this idea unsettled him more than any enemy could. "Show me," he said finally. "I want to understand. Don't just talk. Show me." Kalen nodded. She took, his hand lightly touching his palm. At first nothing happened, but then Elias felt a strange sensation, like a current running through his body, faint at first, then stronger. His heartbeat seemed to synchronize with hers, his thoughts echoing faintly with emotions he could not identify as his own. "You feel it," she said softly. "A part of me is now with you, and a part of you is with me. You will notice it more, during danger or stress. It is subtle now, but it will grow." Elias flexed his fingers, still unsure. "So, if I'm stressed or angry, you feel it too?" Kalen nodded. "Yes, and vice versa. It is not controlling, it is awareness." The concept was overwhelming, yet there was a strange comfort in it. He realized he could sense her calmness even across the distance. It was as if they were connected by invisible threads, guiding each other without words. Later that night, an urgent message arrived from the command center. Extremists within both factions were plotting to disrupt the fragile peace. They planned an attack that could destroy the summit and reignite war. Elias felt Kalen tense beside him. The bond made him aware of her fear, her instinctive calculation of danger. Without speaking, he knew what she wanted: to protect the delegates, to prevent bloodshed, to survive. "Looks like we won't get a quiet night," he muttered. Kalen's eyes met his. "No, we will not. But together we can face it." He realized then that the bond was not just strange or mystical, it was practical. It allowed them to act as a unit. He could anticipate her movements. She could sense his intentions. It was cooperation at a level beyond training, beyond skill. As the attack began, Elias and Kalen moved through the outpost with precision. Humans and Veil soldiers alike followed The summit had seemed like a fragile promise of peace, but Elias knew better. War never truly slept. Even in the calm, danger lurked, waiting for the smallest misstep. That night, the human outpost was alive with whispers and shadows. Every sound, metal scraping, distant footsteps, or the hum of engines, felt like a threat. Elias stood near the perimeter, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the darkness. Kalen walked beside him, her movements quiet but confident. The bond they shared was now stronger. He could sense her alertness, her awareness of threats even before she spoke. It was a strange feeling, like two minds working as one without needing words. "Do you feel it too?" she asked softly. Elias nodded. "Yeah, I think I do. Like I can sense danger before it even happens." Kalen smiled faintly. "It is the bond. It will grow stronger. But it is also a test. Tonight you will understand its true purpose." Before he could respond, alarms blared across the outpost. Red lights flashed, and distant explosions shook the ground. The extremists they had thought defeated were back, stronger and more organized. They had infiltrated the perimeter and were attacking both humans and Velari guards. Elias felt Kaelin tense beside him. The bond amplified her instinctive fear, but also her determination. He mirrored her readiness. Together, they moved toward the chaos, leading soldiers through smoke and fire. The first wave of extremists came from the east, using energy weapons that could tear through walls. Elias and Kaelin positioned themselves strategically. She ducked behind a low barricade, signaling him with a subtle hand movement. He understood instantly, firing with precision, taking down enemies while protecting the princess. "Keep moving," Elias shouted, guiding a group of human soldiers around a burning vehicle. Kaelin followed, her movements graceful yet lethal. The bond allowed them to anticipate each other's actions. When Elias fired, she adjusted her position to cover blind spots. When Kaelin ducked or dove, he instinctively provided cover. Amidst the chaos, a group of Velari delegates was cornered near the command center. Elias grabbed Kaelin's arm. "We need to get them out." She nodded, and they ran together, weaving through gunfire and debris. Elias could feel her fear and determination simultaneously guiding him. He realized the bond was more than awareness. It was trust, absolute and instinctive. They relied on each other completely. During a brief pause behind a collapsed wall, Kaelin whispered, "This is what the bond is for. Not just survival, but to protect life, to act when others cannot." Elias wiped sweat from his brow. "I thought it was just connection. I didn't know it was this powerful." Kaelin's eyes were serious. "Powerful, yes, but also responsibility. We are linked, and we must act as one." They continued their fight through the night, facing ambush after ambush. Each time, the bond guided them, saving not only themselves but others as well. Soldiers began to notice. Human and Velari guards moved with more confidence, inspired by the seamless teamwork between a human soldier and the Velari princess. Finally, the extremists regrouped for one last attack, hoping to strike at the heart of the summit. Elias and Kaelin stood side by side facing the enemy. He could feel her strength, her courage, and it bolstered him. He felt something he had never felt before, a certainty that together they could overcome anything. The battle was fierce. Lasers and plasma clashed, sparks flying as metal was torn apart. Elias fought with precision, Kaelin with grace. Their bond made them anticipate each other's moves. When she dodged, he covered. When he fired, she moved to protect the civilians. At one point, Kaelin was nearly struck by a weapon. Elias reacted instinctively, pushing her aside just in time. He felt a jolt run through him, a mix of fear and relief amplified by the bond. She looked at him, eyes wide but trusting. "You saved me again," she said softly. He shook his head. "We saved each other." By dawn, the extremists were defeated. The summit was in ruins, but the delegates were safe. Elias and Kaelin stood among the rubble, exhausted yet unbroken. Around them, human and Velari soldiers stared in awe. The bond had not only kept them alive but had inspired everyone to see the potential in cooperation. Kaelin turned to Elias, her silver eyes shining. "You are more than a soldier. You are the proof that humans can rise above expectation, that they can act with courage and wisdom where others fail." Elias shook his head, trying to hide the swelling pride. "I'm just a soldier who did what needed to be done. You make it easier to act. I've never fought like this before." Kaelin smiled faintly. "That is the bond. We do not act alone. We act as one. That is why fate chose you. That is why you survived. And that is why we will continue to stand together." As the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, Elias realized the truth. He had entered this war as a man who followed orders, who survived because of training and instinct. But now, he was part of something far greater. A bond of fate had tied him to a princess, to a cause, and to a vision of hope for both civilizations. He looked at Kaelin, standing resolute amidst the rubble. She was not just royalty, she was a symbol of trust, courage, and destiny. and he was her chosen guardian. For the first time, Elias understood that the trials he had faced were not just about survival. They were about proving humanity, proving that courage, compassion, and determination could change fate itself. And with Kalen at his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The battlefield was quiet, but the air was heavy with tension. The extremists had been defeated, the summit ruined, yet the fragile peace remained. Captain Elias Ward stood beside Princess Kalen, watching both humans and Velari soldiers rebuild and organize. The bond between them had grown stronger than ever. He could feel her thoughts, her determination, her careful attention to every movement around them. And she could feel his focus, his resolve, his unwavering sense of duty. Yet even in this quiet, uncertainty lingered. Velari leaders demanded Kalen's return, insisting that she resume her royal duties without the interference of a human soldier. Meanwhile, human commanders debated the risk of keeping her close. Some argued that Elias's presence was dangerous, that humans were not ready to have a soldier bound to alien royalty. Kalen, standing tall despite the events of the past days, faced both sides. "Fate has chosen," she said. "Captain Ward saved my life. By law, by bond, by destiny, he cannot be separated from me. My people will accept it, and you must too." Elias felt the weight of her words. This was no longer just about survival or duty. It was about choice, trust, and destiny. He had entered this war as a soldier, but he was leaving it as something more, someone tied to the fate of an entire civilization. Colonel Briggs approached him, his face unreadable. "Ward, you do realize the implications? Your life, your decisions, even your freedom are now bound to her." Elias nodded. "I understand, but it was never about freedom. It's about doing what's right." The colonel sighed. "You humans always make it complicated." Kalen stepped forward. "Captain Ward is not just a human. He is my protector, my bond, my chosen partner by fate. His courage, his compassion, his decisions, these are qualities that must be recognized, not questioned. If we let politics interfere, we risk everything we fought to protect." The room fell silent. Humans and Velari alike realized the truth in her words. Elias was not just a soldier or a pawn. He was a symbol, a living example of what humanity could achieve when courage, honor, and compassion were allowed to guide actions. Elias felt Kalen's hand brush against his. The touch was small, almost casual, but through the bond he felt its full weight. She trusted him. She relied on him. She had chosen him, not by law alone, but by destiny. "Then it is settled," Elias said quietly, his voice steady. "I will stand by you, not because I am forced to, but because I choose to, always." Kalen's silver eyes softened. "And that is why fate chose you, not just for the bond, but for your heart, your mind, your courage." Word spread quickly across both camps. Stories of the human soldier and the Velari princess spread like wildfire. Soldiers whispered in awe, seeing a human act with bravery and integrity beyond expectation. Aliens discussed in hushed tones how unusual it was for fate to choose a human, and yet here it was, undeniable and unbreakable. Over the next days, humans and Velari worked together under Elias and Kalen's leadership. The bond allowed them to coordinate effortlessly, saving lives, preventing further conflicts, and inspiring cooperation that had once seemed impossible. What had begun as a temporary alliance became a model for peace. One evening, after another, day of successful coordination, Kalen approached Elias in private. The stars stretched across the sky, bright and endless. "You've changed the way my people see humans," she said. Elias laughed softly. "I don't think I've changed much. Maybe I've just survived." She shook her head. "No. You've done more than survive. You've proven that humans are capable of courage, compassion, and wisdom, and through this bond, you've shown me that destiny can choose without fear or prejudice." Elias felt a strange warmth spread through him. The bond was no longer just a connection. It was a partnership, a promise, a living proof of what humans could achieve. The next morning, a formal ceremony was held. Kaylin stood before her people, radiant in her ceremonial attire, and beside her Elias stood with quiet confidence. The Velari elders and the human commanders watched as she declared him her fate-bound guardian. The title carried weight and respo,